Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to another live stream. I hope I'm audible and visible to all of you. Let me just check. Okay, so it seems that the stream is working fine. So today we'll be discussing this chapter number 5 from class 11th NCRT. And until last class, I covered the four chapters from the first unit of NCRT Biology class 11. And today I'll be starting the second unit, which comprises of structural organization in plants and animals. So these are the three key chapters from this unit. First one is the morphology of flowering plants, second is the anatomy of the flowering plants, and third is the structural organization in animals. So morphology will be talking about the external features, anatomy will be the internal features or internal structures, and here we'll be talking about the internal plus external structure of some animal. So let's get started without wasting time. And I will also discuss some advanced topics while talking about the lines of NCRT so that you can also excel in the IAT exam in addition to some advanced questions that might be asked in NEET exam. So please pay your attention on this class and follow along so that you can reap maximum benefit from this class. So the chapter is structural organization in plants and animals. This is the unit and this is the description. So before every chapter or every unit, NCERT has given a brief introduction to the unit. So this is about the unit. The description of the diverse form of life of Earth on Earth was made only by observation, through naked eyes or later through magnifying lenses and microscope. This description is mainly of gross structural features. So this is important because we'll be studying the morphology of flowering plants in this chapter. So that is why the introduction is laying the foundation for that. Both external and internal. So external will be called morphology and internal structures will be called anatomy. In addition, observable and perceivable living phenomenon were also recorded as part of this description. There are some processes ongoing within the organism, and these were also recorded, which will be studied in later chapters, which we call the physiology of the plant or animal. So that will come in the later chapters. Before experimental biology, or more specifically physiology. So this is the term that I used, and they are also describing using the same term. Before the experimental biology, or more specifically physiology, was established as a part of biology, naturalists described only biology. Hence, biology remained as a natural history for a long time. So, you observe a certain organism, you describe how it has evolved over multiple generations and what are its external as well as internal features. So, you did not know about what is going on at the molecular level or at the physiological level. So, that is what they are saying. Before the experimental biology was studied, all these things were mostly on the gross level. The description by itself was amazing in terms of detail. While the initial reaction of a student could be boredom, one should keep in mind that the detailed description was utilized in the later day reductionist biology, where living processes drew more attention from scientists than the description of life form and the structure. So here they are talking about the classification. So in the initial chapters we studied about the biological classification, if you remember, and there we were talking about the difference in the body plan of the organism, in the segmentation and all those things. So for some of the students that might be quite boring because you are making a table, you have to remember all the flow chart, name of which organism belongs to which group, which phylum and so on. So it can be boring for some individuals, but this information was later on utilized by scientists to undertake some experiments. For example, if you know about worms, you can study Caenorhabditis elegans or C. elegans, which was used widely for doing genetics experiment. Or you can use insects like Drosophila melanogaster for doing experiments, again based on genetics. Then you have Neurospora crassa, which is a plant. Then you have some plants like Arabidopsis thaliana. So all these, if you know about their classification, which kingdom, which phylum they belong to, then you can make sense of the experiments that you are doing on them. So it is very important to understand their evolutionary standing, also their physiological characteristics. So before the physiological characteristics were decoded, their evolutionary understanding was the prime focus of the biologist or naturalist as they were called earlier. Although most people will not cover this part, but it is important as a student to understand all these foundational things. That is why I am covering them holistically. From scientists than the description of life form and the structure. Hence, this description became meaningful and helpful in framing research questions. So, see, this is very important. Framing research questions, like for genetics, you can use different organisms. For other kind of experiments, you can use different. For neuroscience experiments, you can use certain set of organisms, so on and so forth. In physiology or evolutionary biology. In the following chapters of this unit, the structural organization of plants and animals, including the structural basis of physiological or behavioral phenomena, is described. For convenience, this description of morphological and anatomical features is presented separately for plants and animals. So that makes sense because plants and animals are two separate kingdoms, so it makes sense to study them separately. So before any unit starts, they have mentioned a scientist also. So here we have Catherine Isau, who was born in Ukraine in 1890. She studied agriculture in Russia and Germany. So all this is not very important. I will highlight whatever is important or a question can be framed on that. She reported in her early publication that the curly top virus spreads through the plant via the food conducting or phloem tissue. So this is something new if you are reading it for the first time, that the food conducting tissue in the plants is called the phloem. So, and this virus, which she studied, the curly top virus, this travels through this phloem by the food conducting tissue or the phloem tissue. So, the curly top virus, remember the virus travels through the phloem, not the xylem. Xylem is the water conducting element, and phloem is the food conducting element. Specifically in plants, usually the non reducing sugars like sucrose is used. So, this is also important. I will just write here. So, sucrose transport. This you will study in the later chapters, but just for your information, sucrose is transported through phloem. And why is sucrose transported? Why not glucose? Because this is a non-reducing sugar. If you have a reducing sugar, then it can react with other compounds and reduce them and itself get oxidized. So then it will not be useful for the plant for metabolism. So that is why we require a non-reducing sugar when we are transporting some molecules through the phloem, so that it does not react with other metabolites. Dr. Isau's Plant Anatomy, published in 1954, took a dynamic developmental approach designed to enhance one's understanding of plant structure and an enormous impact worldwide, literally bringing about a revival of the discipline. So, here she studied plant anatomy, which is the internal structure, and that is why maybe she was able to identify that the virus spreads through the phloem or the food conducting tissue. The Anatomy of Seed Plants by Catherine Issa was published in 1960. I don't think they will ask this directly, but just for your information, remember that this book was written by her. It was referred to as Webster's of Plant Biology. It is encyclopedic. So this may be, I mean, there is very rare chance that they will ask, but maybe they can give you a list of scientists and the books that they have written, and a match the following kind of question might be framed from here. So it's good to just remember that this book she had written, Catherine Isau had written the book of Anatomy of Seed Plants. In 1957, she was elected to the National Academy of Sciences, becoming the sixth woman to receive that honor. In addition to this prestigious award, she received the National Medal of Science from President George Bush in 1918. All this is not very important from science perspective. When Catherine Isau died in the year 1997, Peter Raven, Director of Anatomy and Morphology, Missouri Botanical Garden, remembered that she absolutely dominated the field of plant biology when at the age of 99. So I think only this part is important. First is the curly top virus, and it spread through the food conducting tissue or phloem. And second is the book that she had written, The Anatomy of Seed Plants. So if you remember these two facts, then you will be good to go. So let's dive deeper into this chapter on morphology of flowering plants. So you can see here are the subsections. First is the root stem, leaf, inflorescence, flower, fruit, seed. Then there are some semi-technical description of typical flowering plant and description of some important families. So this is what generally the botanists study. And here we will be looking at an overview of the morphology of plants. So you have some small descriptions or some concise descriptions of each of them. The wide range in the structure of our plants will never fail to fascinate us, even though the angiosperms show such a large diversity in external structure or morphology. So as I'm mentioning this for I think third or fourth time, that the external structure is called morphology, and the internal structure, which is the anatomy, that we'll be studying in the next chapter. They are all characterized by presence of roots, stem, leaf, flower, and fruits. So remember, here is a very important word: flowering plants. So this is very important. We are not talking about the earlier plants like bryophytes, pteridophytes. Those are not considered flowering plants. Here we are talking about the advanced plants, the flowering plants, and that is why here it says that all of them are characterized by the presence of root, stem, leaf, flowers, and fruits. In the earlier plants, if you remember, there were rhizoid, which were root-like structure, and even in the earlier plants, you could remember there was frond, stripe, all these structures. So they were not true root or stem-like structures, if you remember it from the previous lectures that I had covered. So here, but in the flowering kingdom, in the flowering plants, you have the true root, stem, leaf, and flower, fruit, and seeds. All these structures are present. So in chapter 2 and 3, we talked about the classification of plants, exactly what I was talking about. Based on morphological and other characteristics, for any successful attempt at classification and at understanding any higher plant, or for that matter, any living organism, we need to know standard technical terms and standard definitions. We also need to know about the possible variation in different parts, such as adaptation of the plant to their environment. Example, adaptation to various habitats for protection, climbing, storage, etc. So we'll see all these examples. For example, stem modification, root modification, all these things we'll see in the later sections. So if you pull out any weed, you will see that all of them have root, stem, and leaf. They may be bearing flowers and fruits. The underground part of the flowering plant is the root system. So in very layman terms, we can understand that the underground part of the flowering plant is the root system, while the portion above the ground is the shoot system. This is very lay term definition. Although there can be modification of the stem that go underground. For example, potato is a good example of that. So this is just a very general definition. You can just keep it in mind. So here is the root section. In majority of the dicot plants, now this is important. In majority of the dicot plants, the direct elongation of the radicals, so new term for you, radical, leads to the formation of primary roots. So the dicots, I will draw it here. The dicots have this primary root, and this is coming out from the radical. In the seed, there is a region called as radical, and that gives rise to the primary root. So this you should know. What is the origin of primary root? It is the radical, which grows inside the soil. It bears lateral roots of several orders that are referred to as secondary, tertiary, etc. roots. The primary root and its branches constitute the taproot system. So remember this. This looks like a pointed funnel-like shape, and this is called as taproot. And there are some secondary, tertiary. So if there is root coming out from the secondary branches, it is called tertiary. If it is coming directly out from the primary, then it is called secondary. And this one is the primary root. So like that, the main outgrowth of the radical is called as the primary root. Branchings coming out from the primary root are called as secondary root, and then the sub branchings of the secondary root are called as tertiary roots. And this entire thing is called as the taproot system. Taproot system. This is the taproot system found in the dicot plants. So this is very important to remember. So here the example is given for the mustard plant. This diagram is of the mustard plant. You can see the primary root is here, then followed by the secondary root, and the entire thing is called taproot system. In monocots, in monocot plants, the primary root is short-lived. So the radical grows as primary root, but it waits off or it wilts off after some time and is replaced by a large number of roots. These roots originate from the base of the stem and constitute a fibrous root system. So this you should remember. In dicots, there is the taproot system, and the primary root coming out from the radical is intact. Whereas in the monocots, the primary root comes, but it fades away after some time, and then there are some or many fibrous roots which are called as the adventitious roots or the fibrous root system. In some plants like grass, monstera, and the banyan tree, in some plants like grass, so now we are talking about specific examples. So this is important. You should remember these examples. Some plants like grass, monstera, and the banyan tree, roots arise from the part of the plant other than the radical and are called as adventitious roots. So these examples you should remember wherever these are given. For example, for a fibrous root, the example that is given in NCERT is wheat. For taproot system, you have the example of mustard. So you'll see more example of dicots and monocots, but at least these examples you should keep a note of and try to revise them as soon as possible so that you store it in your long-term memory. The main function of the root are absorption of water. So all of us know the main function. This is not something new. Absorption of water and mineral from the soil, providing a proper anchorage to the plant. So to keep the plants rooted in the soil, it is the function of root, as the name suggests, root. So it is going to anchor the plant in the soil, storing reserve food material. In some cases, you might have seen like the sweet potatoes are example of root storing food. And synthesis of plant growth regulators. So you see example of some growth regulators that are synthesized at the root tip and they move upwards. So we'll see some examples in the later chapters on the plant growth regulators. So here is the structure of taproot system. These are the lateral appendages. This is the main primary root. This is the fibrous root seen in the case of monocots. And these are the adventitious roots seen in the case of grasses, monstera, and banyan tree. So remember these examples. While I'm teaching, keep revising all these things so that by the end of the lecture, you will remember most of the thing. So before moving to the next section, let me check if there are any questions from you. Okay, so let's move to the next section, which is the regions of the root. So I talked about the different kinds of root, the taproot system, adventitious root, and the fibrous root. Now let's look at the regions of the root. The root is covered at the apex by a thimble-like structure called the root cap. So this structure you see here, this thimble-like structure, this is called the root cap, which is going to cover the roots um, tapering portion to protect it from the friction from the soil and also some infection from the bacteria or other fungi that may be present in the soil and can infect the plant. So that is to provide the protection. It protects the tender apex of the root, or what I call as the uh, tapering portion of the root, as it makes way through the soil. So now this is going to penetrate the soil and it is going to face a lot of external pressure. So how do we protect it? Using this root cap like structure. A few millimeter above the root cap is the region of meristematic activity. This is very important because the cells need to divide faster, and that is why they have this region of meristematic activity. So meristems are the region where the cells are actively dividing. So in this region of meristematic activity, you can see that there are a bunch of cells here. You can call them stem cells. And these are the region, although they are not present in the stem, so don't get confused. Let's call them meristems at the moment. Otherwise, you will get confused with actual stem cells. But these are the actively dividing cells, and these ensure that the tissue in this region further grows and extends deeper in the soil. So this is the region responsible for the downward growth of the root, or it can be upwards also, but in general it is towards the gravity or gravitropic movement. So that's why I said downward movement, but it can be in either direction, whichever is uh, allowed for the root. For example, you'll see some examples where the root grows in the upward direction in mangroves. The cells of this region are very small because they are actively dividing, so they do not have so much time to accumulate more and more in their cytoplasm. So that is why they are rapidly dividing, and their nuclear cytoplasmic ratio is very high. So remember this. So this is another extra information. Nuclear cytoplasmic ratio is very high. This is nuclear and this is cytoplasmic ratio high for meristematic tissue. Meristematic tissue. Maybe I will write it completely, otherwise you people may get confused. The nuclear cytoplasmic ratio is very high for meristematic tissue. This you should remember because they are actively dividing, so they are very small in size, they have very thin wall and have a dense protoplasm because there is lot of protein production going on inside the cell. So that is why their protoplast is very thick, very viscous. Plus, they have thin walls, so they do not have time for the deposition of the secondary wall or the middle lamella, which is seen usually in the plant cell wall. So here the walls are very thin, so there is not enough time for the cell walls to form properly because they are actively dividing. So this is very important. You should remember this. They divide repeatedly, as I already explained, and the cells proximal means near to this region undergo rapid elongation and enlargement. This is the region of elongation. Because these cells are dividing rapidly, now these cells which are above them, they are not dividing, they are maturing. So they can elongate in size, they can become larger, they can accumulate more cytoplasm as opposed to the cells in the meristematic region, which are here, which are in the bottom layer, closer to the root cap, responsible for the growth of the root in length. So this is important. So these cells are rapidly dividing. They are producing more and more cell, but they are not giving this lengthening of the root. The key or the important role of elongation is played by the zone of elongation cells because they have already divided. Now they are maturing. They are making their cells larger by accumulating more and more stuff. So that is why the elongation is attributed to the root zone of elongation region of the roots. This region is the region of elongation. The cells of the elongation zone gradually differentiate and mature. So, by maturing, what I mean is they are making the cytoskeleton in such a way that the cells are lengthwise longer. Plus, they are also accumulating more in their vacuole, in their cytoplasm, so that the cell also enlarges in size or in volume. Proximal to the region of elongation is called the region of maturation. So, next to this is the region of maturation because the cells are becoming mature here. From this region, some of the epidermal cells form very fine and delicate thread-like structure called root hairs. So remember this. Where do we get the root hairs from? We get the root hairs not from the meristematic region or elongation. We get the root hairs from the region of maturation. So this is the region which will give rise to root hair. Because these cells are already differentiated, now they can give rise to some protrusions in the soil for better surface area, more surface area. As you can imagine, if there is only this cylinder-like structure, it can only absorb, let's say if this is a cylinder, then it will be pi r square h, its volume. But if there are many small cylinders, then their volume will increase, plus the surface area will be also more. So 2 pi r h will be the surface area of this thing. But now that there are many more smaller cylinders coming out from that, the overall surface area will increase dramatically. So in that case, it will be much more beneficial for the plant to absorb the nutrients from the soil. And these root hairs absorb water and minerals from the soil, exactly what I was describing here, because of their increased surface area. Now let's move on to the next organ, which is the stem. What are the features that distinguish a stem from the root? Stem is the ascending part of the axis. Usually it is growing in the upward direction, positively phototropic, bearing branches, leaves, flowers, and fruits. It develops from the plumule. So remember, the root grows from the radicle, but now for stem, it grows from the plumule region of the embryo of a germinating seed. The stem bears nodes and internodes. The region of the stem where leaves, so node and internode, you might have seen, for example, key example of this can be sugarcane. So these regions where the buds are present in the sugarcane, these are called nodes. And between two nodes, the intermediate region is called as internode, or the region present between two nodes is called as the internode. So this is also there is some application of phytohormones like gibberellins to increase the internode length or elongation of the internode. That we'll study later on. But for now, you should know what are nodes and internodes, and they're present in the aerial part or the stem of the plant body. The region of the stem where leaves are born are called nodes. So this is the region where you see no leaves coming out from, because there are buds also. While internodes are the portion between two nodes, exactly what I wrote here. The stem bears buds. Again, we see the bud here. So this is a bud, which may be terminal or axillary. So these are the axillary bud because they are present in the axil. So they are present in the axil of the leaf, or they can be present at the top, at the terminal end. So this will be called a terminal bud because it is at the terminal or the end of the growing axis. So this is a terminal bud. But it can be also present in other locations, like here we can see this is axillary bud. Stem is generally green when young and later often becomes woody and dark brown, not very important. Main function of the stem is spreading out branches bearing leaves, flowers, and fruits. So here is the function of stem: conducts water, minerals, and photosynthesis. Because the leaves are present on the stem, so it is exposed to the sunlight, and that is very important for doing photosynthesis. So that is why you will get the production of photosynthesis, for example, glucose, which will be then converted to sucrose and transported to the other parts of the plant body. Some stems perform the function of storage of food, for example, potato, support, protection, and of vegetative propagation. We'll see examples of this later on. Leaf is a lateral, generally flattened. So this is important. It is generally flattened structure borne on the stem, but it can be also some. There are some examples of thick leaves also, like bryophyllum has thick leaf, fleshy leaf. It is called. It develops at the node and bears a bud in its axil. So what I drew here, this is a leaf, and there is the bud in this axil, and it is born at the node. So this is important for understanding the positioning of all the different components in the stem. The axillary bud later develops into a branch. So the bud that we drew here as the axillary bud, I will just write it here, axillary bud. This will become a branch, and on that branch we'll get new leaves. So like it is sub branching and further branching and branching on, so that you get more and more leaves which can produce more and more photosynthesis for the plant to grow and survive. Then leaves originate from shoot apical meristem. This is called as SAM, and are arranged in an acropetal order. So these are arranged in an acropetal order. They are the most important vegetative organ for plant for photosynthesis. So by acropetal, what do we mean? That the new leaves will be on the top and the older leaves will be at the bottom. So this is the acropetal. Wait, I will just show you a diagram for this. So acropetal order is the arrangement in plants where new flowers or structure develop at the apex and the older ones are at the base. So this is what I told you, and let me show you the image for this. So here you can see that leaves are generally acropetal, but In case of flowers, it can be basipetal or acropetal. Basipetal meaning the younger flowers are born at the base of the tree or at the base of the axis of the stem. In case of leaves, it is generally the younger leaves are at the top and the older leaves are present at the bottom. So that is why you should remember this as a fact given in the NCRT. I hope it is clear. They are the most important vegetative organs for the photosynthesis. This is again very important. So they are not taking part in the sexual reproduction of the plant, but they are very important for the vegetative maintenance of the plant by performing photosynthesis because they have lots and lots of chlorophyll. So even the stem can do a bit of photosynthesis because it has the pigment, but most of it is concentrated in the leaves, and they are the centers or the reaction centers for doing photosynthesis and producing energy. Not energy in the form of mitochondrial energy ATP, but in the form of stored energy in form of sucrose. A typical leaf consists of three parts. So there is leaf, base, petiole, and lamina. So this is very easy to understand. Here is the base you can see here. Then there is this petiole, which is this small connection between the main branch and the leaf lamina, and this is the lamina or the flat flattened structure, which we generally call a leaf. But this entire thing is called as a leaf. So this entire thing is a leaf, and it is composed of the lamina, which we usually call a leaf. There is this leaf base from where it is coming out, and there is this stalk which is connecting it to the main branch, which is the petiole. The leaf is attached to the stem by the leaf base and may bear two lateral small leaf-like structures called stipules. So it may have these outgrowth, and these are called as stipules. This is also a good question that can be asked directly. What are the small leaf-like structures called at the base of leaf? And it is easy to answer if you know this. It is called a stipule. In monocots, the leaf base expands into a sheath covering the stem partially or wholly. So if it was a monocot, then there would be a sheath like this covering around the base, and that is called as pulvinous. For example, in the leguminous plants. So in some leguminous plants, the leaf base may also become it's different from the earlier description. So that covering is not named here, but you should just remember that in monocots there can be this covering present. If you remember some monocot leaves, you will see this structure. There is a slight covering, especially for grasses. If you remember, there are some grasses that have this covering around the leaf base. Then in leguminous plants, the leaf base is called as pulvinous and it is swollen. Petiole help hold the blade to light. Long, thin, flexible petiole allow leaf blade to flutter in wind, hereby cooling the leaf and bringing fresh air to the leaf surface. So this is very important for the leaf to freely move. Otherwise, if the leaf is stuck like this and the sun is moving in some other direction, then how will it receive the maximum amount of sunlight to produce the photosynthesis, right? So the leaf should be slightly flexible so that with the wind or some other external actors acting on it, it should be able to manage its shape so that it is not destroyed because of its rigidity. So there should be some kind of flexibility, and that comes from collenchyma, which is present in the leaf. So we'll study that in the later chapters on tissues, different kind of tissues in plants. Petiole help hold the blade to the light, and the lamina or the leaf blade is the green expanded part of the leaf with veins and winglets. So these are important for transporting the water, minerals, and also bringing different kinds of photohormones, phytohormones, or regulators, plant growth regulators, PGRs. There is usually a middle prominent vein which is known as midrib. This might not be asked directly, but good to know just that this is called as the midrib. Midrib. Veins provide rigidity to the leaf blade and act as channels of transport for, so very easy to understand because these are like our veins. So like our veins support the transport of oxygen and take away the carbon dioxide. Similarly here they will help in the support in the movement of nutrients towards the different parts of the body of the plant body and then removing the waste. So this is how it works in plants as well. Minerals and food material, the shape, margin, apex, surface, and extent of incision of lamina varies in different leaves. So they have just mentioned what are the differences in the lamina, but they have not given the example for this. So easier for you to remember. Otherwise, you could have been asked to remember the example for all the different shapes, margins. There can be different kind of margins like there are some jagged margins leaves also, or there can be some pinnately compound, palmately compound leaves. So all those are the things that one can study, but here they are not given, so easier for you to remember. Venation is the arrangement of veins and the veinlets. It's easy to remember, it's called as the venation, just the arrangement of veins and veinlets. Form a network and the venation is termed as reticulate. So if it is like a network, as you can see here, then it is called a reticulate venation, like a branching pattern. When the veins run parallel to each other within the lamina, it's called parallel venation. Very easy to remember. Like in the banana leaf, you might see there are parallel venations. Then leaves of dicot plants generally possess reticulate. So this is again a point of difference between dicots and monocots, because here we are only focusing on flowering plants, so we'll be mostly distinguishing between the dicots and monocots. Parallel venation is the characteristic of mostly monocots. Then coming to types of leaves, so you have simple leaf where the lamina is entire or where incised the incisions do not touch the midrib. So here can be an example of a normal leaf or a simple leaf because there is no incision and it is not neither touching the midrib. But if there are incision, when the incision of the lamina reach up to the midrib, breaking it into a number of leaflets, the leaf is called compound. So now if the incision reach up to the midrib, then it is called a compound leaf. So one leaf is maybe, you can imagine as dividing into many smaller sub-leaves. That is called a compound leaf. A bud is present in the axil of petiole in both simple and compound leaf, but not in the axil of leaflet of the compound leaf. So this is important. So there is this bud which is present in the axil of this compound leaf. So here is an axillary bud, but you will not find a bud here. So no bud. These are the small leaflets. These are the leaflets. Let me write it properly maybe. This is not visible. So these are called the leaflet. These small leaf-like structure are called as the leaflets, but they do not have bud. So there is no bud here. But if you look at the petiole of the main leaf, then it has a bud. So this is very important. You should remember this. The question may be framed on this using some complex language, but the concept is very easy. The compound leaves may be of two types. So again, here it can be pinnately compound leaf or palmately compound leaf. So here are the examples given. Number of leaflets are present on a common axis, the ridges which represents the midrib of the leaf, as in neem. You can see these are the multiple leaflets. They are present on the same midrib. This is the midrib. And they are present on the same midrib. These are the leaflets, small leaflet. And here we will see one bud, axillary bud. This is called as the pinnately compound leaf. Very easy to remember. Now you also have the palmately compound leaf where the leaflets are attached at a common point. So here you see all the leaflets are attached to one single common point. This is called as palmately compound leaf. Here you see they are attached at different point but they have one common midrib. But here again they have one common midrib but they are also attached at a single point. This is the difference between the pinnately compound and palmately compound leaf. Example here is neem and here the example is silk cotton. Remember these two examples, very easy. Now next coming to an important topic which is phyllotaxy or phyllotaxy as some people call it. Pattern of arrangement of leaves. So phyll or phyle is the leaf. So arrangement of that is called phyllotaxy on the stem or branch, usually of three type: alternate, opposite, and word. So again, very simple examples are given in NCERT. If you read some advanced books, you will see many more examples of this. but for the sake of understanding it from NCERT's point of view, it is very easy. An alternate type of phyllotaxy, a single leaf arises at each node in alternate manner. So here you can see the example given is China rose. So on this node you see one leaf coming out in this direction. Here it is coming out in this direction, this direction. So it is alternate, right? One times it is on the left side, then right, then left, then right, then left, then right. So this is to maximize the sunlight that is being received by the plant. This is one type of phyllotaxy called as alternate type. Example is China rose, mustard, sunflower. All these are the examples of alternate phyllotaxy. Next is opposite type. A pair of leaves arise at each node and in the opposite direction. Example is calotropis and guava. So here you can see the opposite one. So leaves are coming in both the opposite directions from the same point. So this is called as opposite phyllotaxy. And this is seen in guava and calotropis. And then finally, if there are more than two leaves arising at a node, form a whorl, then it is called a whorl phyllotaxy, seen in Alstonia. So you can see there are multiple leaves coming out from the same point and in all the different directions. You can see it is like 360-degree covering the entire spectrum of whatever sunlight may come. Although this may be useful or may be useless in some cases depending on the environment, but this is what is seen in nature, the different kinds of phyllotaxy. So let me check if there are any questions until this point. Okay, so let's move to the next section, which is the inflorescence. So as you all know that inflorescence is basically a collection of different flowers, many small flowers coming together to become more conspicuous for the pollinators. So we'll be studying about that now. The inflorescence. A flower is a modified shoot wherein shoot apical meristem changes to floral meristem. So if you study in higher classes, you will also study the developmental processes that govern this conversion from SAM to floral meristem. Floral meristem. There are many molecular players that have been decoded that play a role in this conversion. But here they have just given that SAM or this shoot apical meristem, it is converted to floral meristem, and that floral meristem gives rise to flower. So we can say that flower is a modified shoot. Internodes do not elongate and the axis gets condensed. For flowers, the shoot, I told you about the nodes and the internodes kind of structure, but in flowers, you don't see the elongation of that. You see compression of that or the condensation of that. And from each node, you will see different floral whorls coming out. The apex produces different kind of floral appendages laterally at successive nodes instead of leaves. So here instead of leaves, which was seen generally in the case of stem, you will see some modified organs because now the SAM is converted to floral meristem. So now the floral meristem will have a different kind of identity and it will give rise to different kind of whorl like calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium. These all things will be important and why it is important for the sexual reproduction of the plant. When a shoot tip transforms into flower, it is always solitary. So if it is only a single tip, then it will be always one flower. But if there are the arrangement of this, the arrangement of flowers on the floral axis is termed as inflorescence. In very late terms, they have defined that the arrangement of the flower on this axis of this entire floral axis is called as inflorescence. Depending on whether the apex gets developed into a flower or continues to grow, two major types of inflorescence are defined. One is racemose and the other one is cymose. So racemose type the main axis continues to grow. You can remember this as the floral axis is trying to race, so it is trying to continue growing like it is racing somewhere. So the growth will continue, and it is called as indeterminate type of growth. And the flowers are born laterally in an acropetal succession. So here the bottommost flowers will be older, then the next ones will be younger, younger, younger. Because the entire axis is growing in the upward direction or in the lateral direction, in whatever direction, the flowers at the base will be the oldest ones, and then the later ones that will come in the upward direction will be younger ones. So that is why we see acropetal succession in the racemose inflorescence. In cymose, type of inflorescence, the main axis terminates in a flower. So now the maximum growth that the inflorescence had to achieve, it has already achieved. So the flower that will come out at that level will be the oldest, but the flowers that will come after it will be the younger ones. So in this case, we will see a basipetal succession. The flowers are born in a basipetal order, and the growth is limited here because the bud which was at the top has stopped growing. So that is why this is a different kind of inflorescence. There are many more other types of inflorescence like spadix, yeah, and other types of inflorescence that get converted to flower, to fruits, other kind of fruits which we generally consume. For example, pineapple is a kind of inflorescence. So guava is a kind of inflorescence. Not sorry, not guava, but sitafar is a kind of inflorescence. So all these things are inflorescence, and there are many kind of inflorescence that you can study. But in NCERT, they are given two simple racemose and cymose, and you should remember the difference between them. Then next, coming to the structure of flower. So I told you about this shoot apical meristem getting converted to floral meristem. But what are the different walls? Already I told you, but here they are going to talk about that in a bit more detail. The flower is the reproductive unit in the angiosperm. So that is why the conversion of SAM to floral meristem is very important. Otherwise, how will the plant reproduce sexually? It is meant for sexual reproduction. A typical flower has four different kinds of whorls arranged successively on the swollen end of the stalk or pedicel called thalamus or the receptacle. So the thalamus has these four different kinds of whorls, and these are called calyx, corolla, androecium, and gynoecium. Calyx and corolla are accessory organs, meaning they support the sexual reproduction, but they do not partake in the sexual reproduction. But which are the key organs here? And the androecium, which is the male gamete producing one, and the gynoecium, which is the female gamete producing organ, are the reproductive organs. In some flowers like lily, the calyx and corolla are not distinct and are termed as perianths. This you should remember that it can be directly asked in which flower the calyx and corolla are called as perianth. So they are not distinct. The calyx and corolla are together, and it is seen in lily, and it is called as perianth. When a flower has both androecium and gynoecium, it is bisexual. Easy to remember because it has both the male and the female gamete. A flower having either only stamen or only carpel is called unisexual. Again, very easy to remember. There is only one sex, either male or female. Now coming to the symmetry, something what we studied in animal kingdom as well. So here the flowers may be actinomorphic. Actinomorphic is radial symmetry. You remember in starfish we studied radial symmetry, or in Pinophora or in Coelenterata we studied the radial symmetry. So here the flowers can be also radially symmetrical, and it is called as actinomorphic. So this is actinomorphic, or it can be zygomorphic, which is bilateral symmetry. So these terms we'll be using later on when we are describing the plant families. When a flower can be divided into two equal halves in any radial plane through the center, it is called actinomorphic. So this is the standard definition of radial symmetry. You should remember the examples: mustard, datura, and chili. So they belong to a certain family, and that is why the flowers of that family are actinomorphic. When it can be divided into two similar halves only in one particular vertical plane, it is called zygomorphic. So example here is pea, gulmohar, bean, cassia. And a flower is asymmetric when it cannot be divided into two equal halves by any vertical plane. And here the example is canna. So remember the example for asymmetric flower as well. This is canna. Then P. gulmohar, bean, and cassia are zygomorphic. Zygo meaning two. So two equal halves. There is only one plane, and it is what you can say bilaterally symmetrical. Bilateral zygo. So you can remember it like this: zygo meaning two, and bilateral meaning also two. So if it can be divided into two halves using one plane, then it is bilateral symmetrical or zygomorphic. Then the only one remaining is actinomorphic, which is radially symmetrical. Flower may be trimerous, tetramerous, pentamerous, depending on the floral appendages are whether they are in the multiple of 3, 4, or 5. So tri, tetra, penta, 3, 4, 5. Very easy, simple terminology. Flowers with bracts, reduced leaf found at the base of the pedicel are called bracteate, and those without bracts are called ebracteate. So if there are some reduced leaf-like structure, you remember stipules in the leaf. Now here the reduced leaf-like structure is called as bracts, and if the flower has that at the end of its pedicel or the stalk, then it is called as bracteate. If it is not there, then it is called ebracteate. So this is also important to understand, but I don't think they will ask this very much directly. Then there are a few more terminologies. For example, here is hypogynous. So if the flower is below the gynoecium, so this is the gynoecium, and all the floral whorls are below the gynoecium. So this is a hypo meaning below the gynoecium. A and B. So here also you can see it is below. So this is the gynoecium, and all the whorls are coming. Oh, exactly. Oh no, sorry. This is not coming from the below. This is coming from similar kind of levels. This is perigynous. This is around the gynoecium level. In this case also you can see it is on this similar level. And here you can see this is epigynous. So the whorls, for example here the stamen, these are above the gynoecium. The gynoecium is buried at a lower level. If you can think of this as y-axis, then in terms of this, you can see that the positioning of gynoecium can be also used as a characteristic for differentiating between the different kinds of flowers. So this is hypo because everything is below gynoecium. This is peri because they are on almost similar level, peri, and this is epigynous because this is above the gynoecium. Based on the position of calyx, corolla, and androecium in respect of the ovary of on thalamus, so the ovary's position, what I drew here, you can see I called it gynoecium, but in general it is the ovary. On thalamus, the flowers are described as hypogynous, peri, and epigynous. In the hypogynous flower, the gynoecium occupies the highest position. So if the gynoecium, as I told in the previous diagram, if it is in the highest position, then it is called hypogynous because everything else is below the gynoecium. Remember it like this. Otherwise, you might think that the gynoecium is below. No, everything is below gynoecium. That is why it is called hypogynous. Other parts are situated below it, and the ovary in such case is called superior. Ovary is superior because everything else is below. Easy to remember very logically, right? If everything is below the ovary, then the ovary will be superior. Example here is mustard, China rose, brinjal. Gynoecium is situated in the center, and other part of the flowers are located on the rim of thalamus, almost at the same level. So here, as I showed you, they were almost at the same level of the gynoecium. Then it is called perigynous, and the ovary is called half inferior. So plum, rose, peach, and epigynous when the margin of thalamus grow upward and closing the ovary completely. So when the ovary is buried inside, like here in the last figure, so the ovary here is completely buried inside, and the other floral whorls are on top of that. So in that case, the ovary will be called as inferior ovary. Example here is guava, cucumber, and the ray florets of sunflower. So in this sunflower inflorescence, the ray florets flowers have this kind of ovary. Remember this. So now talking about the parts of a flower. has four floral whorls. I think this I'm talking for the fourth or fifth time. Calyx, corolla, androecium, and gynoecium. So what is calyx? Calyx is the outermost whorl of the flower, and members are called sepals. Sepals, petals. Then there is androecium and gynoecium. So uh, this is what we call as the four floral whorls. Sepals are green leaf-like structures, so they can also do a little bit of photosynthesis, but the main function is to protect the flower in the bud stage. If it is together, gamo meaning united, so it is gamosepalous, and if it is free, then it is called polysepalous. Because there are multiple and they are not fused, then it is polysepalous. But if there are multiple and they are fused or united, then it is gamosepalous. Gamo meaning like marriage. So they are together, they are united. So gamosepalous meaning their sepals are united. Then coming to corolla, composed of petals. So you have seen different beautiful petals of the flowers. That is basically the calyx whorl or the corolla whorl of the flower. Petals are usually bright colored. So this is to attract the pollen carrying insects. Attract insects for pollination. Calyx corolla may be gamopetalis. So again, similar to gamosepalous, where the sepals are united, the petals can also be united. Gamopetalis or polypetalous, where there are multiple petals but they are not fused. Shape and color of corolla vary greatly in plants. This all of us know. Corolla may be tubular, bell shaped, funnel shaped, wheel shaped. So there can be many, many, many varieties of corolla. That is what they are trying to say here. Now, the arrangement of the sepals or petal in the floral bud with respect to the member of the same whorl is known as aestivation. So remember, this is aestivation, not kind of the hibernation aestivation concept. So remember, in terms of botany or in plant biology, aestivation means the arrangement of sepals and petals with respect to the other floral whorls. So this can be asked, and I think this is asked quite repeatedly. So this is an important topic that you should study and understand quite well. The main types of aestivation are valvate, twisted, imbricate, and vexillary. So these are the four different types of aestivations that we can study here. So this is the valvate, like they are almost touching, but there is some kind of gap. Then twisted is like you have the flower and you twist it little bit. So you see one end of the petal is overlapping with the other end. It can be sepal also. So it is about the arrangement of sepal or petal. But generally we see this with the floral whorl called corolla, which is the petal. So this is one end is covering the other end. Now the other end of this one is covering the first end of this next one. So like that you see a twist kind of thing. Then there is imbricate. So imbricate you have certain ones are covered on both sides, certain ones are covering on both sides. So there is no fixed arrangement of which wall will be covering the next one or not. So here there was no particular petal was covering each other. They were all independently present openly. But here they formed a tubular-like structure where one was covering the next one, and so on and so forth. But in the case of imbricate, the pattern is such that one of the petals is entirely inside, one of the petal is entirely outside, and some of them are uh, partially outside and partially inside. And vexillary is one of the unique ones where you see this kind of keel carina and this bigger petal-like structure. So there are one, two, three, four, five petals, and this one is fused. So we'll talk about this later because this is important in the pea family. So you might have heard of the pea flowers which Mendel used for genetic experiments, or maybe we'll later discuss that. Maybe you're not aware of that at this moment. So I will explain what that means, the auxiliary aestivation there. So here in the diagram, androecium, gynoecium, calyx, corolla, and the pedicel, which is the stalk. Calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium, all of this we already talked about them in quite detailed manner. So now let's look at the example of this. Suppose a petal in a whorl just touch one another at the margin. Like in this case, I told you, without overlapping, as in Calotropis, it is valvate. one margin of appendage overlap that of the next one. So one is overlapping next, next is overlapping next, next is like that if it is going. Then example is China rose, ladyfinger, cotton. So then it is called twisted. Margin of sepal petal overlap one another but not in any particular direction. So example is cassia and gulmohar. So here it is called as imbricate. Remember the example. Here the examples are more important than the definition of different kind of festivation. And finally, in pea and bean flowers, there are five petals. The largest is the standard, overlap the two lateral petals, which are called the wings, which in turn overlap the two smallest anterior petals, called as the keel. This type of aestivation is called vexillary or papilionaceous. Papilionaceous or vexillary aestivation. You can see this is the standard, this is the keel and carina. So this was about the aestivation. Now, before going to the next section, let me check if there are any questions. Okay, so let's talk about androgen. So now that I've explained you quite well, this should be very easy to understand. And wherever I feel that section is more important, I will highlight that so that you can revise it more thoroughly. Androgen is composed of stamens. Each stamen, which represents the male reproductive organ, consists of stalk and anther. So the stalk is called filament and anther. These are the two components of each stamen. Each anther is usually bilobed, meaning it has two lobe-like structure and it is connected via filament to the main stalk, to the main stratum, you can say. Each lobe has two chambers, the pollen sac. The pollen sac are the two chambers. So usually there are tetra four-chambered or bilobe structure in the anther. The pollen grains are produced in pollen sac. A sterile stamen is called staminode. So this term can be directly asked. What is a sterile stamen called as? It is called as staminode, which is not able to produce a fertile male gamete. Then it is called a staminode. Stamen of flower may be united with one another, such as petals. So when it is stamens are attached to the petal, when it is attached to the petal, then it is called epipetalis. Because it is attached to the petal, it is epipetalis. Example is brinjal. When it is attached to the perianth, then it is epiphyllous. Because phyllis means like leaf, and the sepals and petals fuse together to form perianth. If you remember from the previous example I talked about. So if it is attached to the perianth, then it is called epiphyllous. Example is lily, and lily also has perianth. I told you a few moments ago. Stamens in a flower may be either free, then it is called polyandrous, so or may be united in varying degrees. So if it is in one bunch or one bundle, then it is adelphous. Adelphous meaning the fusion. Adelphi is the fusion or uniting stamens. That condition is called as adelphi. So if it is one bundle, then it is monoadelphi. Example is China rose. If there are two bundles, then it is diadelphi. Example is pea. If there are more than two bundles, then it is polyadelphi. Example is citrus. So remember, these are bundles. These are not individual stamens. So it's not like there are many individual stamens. There are many bundles of individual. There are many bundles of fused stamens. So then it is called polyadelphous. There may be variation in the length of filament and within a flower. Example is salvia and mustard. Remember, it is not salvinia. Salvinia belongs to the previous groups of plants that we studied, but here it is salvia and mustard. So here the stamen can be, or the filament can be of varying length within a flower. Salvia and mustard. So here you just have to remember all these examples. What is the sterile stamen, staminode? Epiphyllous condition when it is fused with perianth. Epipetalous when it is fused with petal. Example is brinjal here. Then monodelphous China rose, diadelphous pea, and polyadelphous citrus. Just all these examples, if you remember, it will be very easy. Variation in the length, salvia and mustard. Next is gynoecium. So gynoecium is the female reproductive part made up of one or more carpels. So the individual units are called carpel and the entire whorl is called as gynoecium. Carpel can consist of three main parts: style, stigma, ovary, and stigma, style, ovary. So stigma is the uppermost receptive part. Then style is the stalk, which is connecting it to the ovary, which is the place where the uh, ovules are, which are the female gametes. So ovary is the enlarged basal part on which the elongated tube style on which lies the elongated tube style. The style connects the ovary to the stigma. Stigma is the tip of the style, receptive surface for pollen grain. Each ovary bears one or more ovules attached to the flattened cushion-like placenta. So similar to humans or other animals, there is placenta here. Although it is not same like that placenta, but it is called placenta because it supports the growth of ovules. Where when one or more carpel is present, they may be free. So example is lotus and rose have free carpel and it is called apocarpus. When it is fused, syn carpus, like gamopetalous and polypetalous was free. Gamopetalous meaning together. Although they should have been consistent with the terminology, but I think because of conventions or historical considerations, these terms have stayed like this. So we'll just try to remember it as it is. And it's very easy to remember. Syn meaning together, so syn carpus. When carpels are fused, as in mustard and tomato. After fertilization, the ovules develop into seeds and the ovary matures into fruits. The ovules which are attached to the placenta, they become seed, and the entire ovary which was harboring the ovules, that becomes the fruit that we eat or the animals eat. So that is a means of luring the animals for pollination. Then another important point similar to activation, placentation is again very important. So the arrangement of ovules within the ovary is called placentation. Like the arrangement of sepals and petals was called as activation. The arrangement of ovules in the ovary is called as placentation. Placentation can be of different type: marginal, axial, parietal, basal, central, and free centrals. These are the different kind of placentation that you should know. These are also asked in the board exams of CBSE, so you may be asked directly to explain the different types of placentation for 5 marks or something like that. So that's why you should understand this, and this can be directly asked as an example in the NEET exam. So again, it's very important to understand this topic. In marginal placentation, the placenta forms a ridge along the ventral suture of the ovary, and the ovules are born on this ridge, forming two rows, as in P. Here you can see this is the marginal placentation. So here this is the example of P, and here they are saying that the placenta forms a ridge. So this ridge is the placenta. This blue color that I'm drawing here, this is the placenta which is going to support each ovule. These are the ovules which are supported by the food that is coming through the placenta along the ventral suture of the ovary. So on the ovary, the ventral side, which is the, so it's difficult to explain ventral side in plants, but you can just remember it. And the ovules are born on this ridge, forming two rows as in P. So there are, if you open a pea, I think currently now you can see the pea in the markets, and just open it and you will see there are two rows alternatively, and these are the ovules, and that is why it is called the marginal placentation because it is on the margin of that ridge that the ovules are placed. When the placenta is axial and the ovules are attached in it in the multilocular ovary, then the placentation is called axial, as in China rose, tomato, lemon. So here you can see this is on the axis. So if this is like a wheel, if you can imagine it, so this is on the axis of the wheel, and this is called as the axial placentation, present on the axis. And multilocular ovary, meaning the ovary has multiple chambers, multiple locules, one, two, three, like these multiple locules are present in the ovary, and the ovules are present on the axis of this. So that is why it is called as axial placentation. Example is China rose, tomato, lemon in parietal. So it is on the periphery. Parietal meaning it's on the periphery. Like here you can see. And here the ovary is only one locule. Unlike here where there are multiple locules, multiple locules, multiple chambers here you can see, right? The ovules develop on the inner wall of the ovary or on the peripheral part. Here you can see on the peripheral part. Ovary is one chambered. See here it is written one chambered, but it becomes two chambered due to the formation of false septums. There can be a false septum, maybe a false divide, which can divide it something like this, and then it will be called as truly it is a one chambered ovary itself, but because of the false septum, it appears to be two chambered. So here the example is mustard and argemone. And when the ovules are born on the central axis, so here this is the central axis, again quite similar to the axial presentation, but here the locules are only one, so there is no dividing of the ovary in multiple chambers. On the central axis and the septa are absent, so this is very important. When the septa is absent and it is born on the central axis, then it is called as free central. Example is dianthus and primrose. Then finally there is the basal placentation. The placenta develops at the base of the ovary. Easy to remember from the name. Single ovule is attached to it. Example is sunflower and marigold. So this is at the base and ovule, basal ovule. That is why this is called as the basal placentation. I hope it is clear. So now let's move to the next part, which is the fruit. Fruit is a characteristic feature of the flowering plant because we are studying the flowering plants and the flowers give rise to the fruits. Basically, the ovary of the flowers will give rise to the fruits. So here it is written fruit is a characteristic of the flowering plants. Mature or ripened ovary. Yes, exactly what I said before this. Developed after fertilization. If the fruit is found without fertilization, remember this, of the ovary, without the fertilization of the ovary, then it is called as parthenocarpic fruit. There is no fusion of gametes, no fertilization of the ovule, then it is called as a parthenocarpic fruit. Generally, the fruit consists of a wall or pericarp. Carp, if you can remember as the fruit, peri meaning around the fruit. So there is this wall, which is called as the pericarp, and seeds. Generally, the fruit consists of a pericarp and seeds. Pericarp may be dry or fleshy. When pericarp is thick and fleshy, it is differentiated into outer epicarp, mesocarp in the middle, and the inner endocarp. So it can be very thin, like only the seed is present and then a thin covering of that. Or it can be like mango, where you have the seed in between, then there is some fleshy part which people usually eat, and then there is the skin of the mango, which you can call as the epicarp. In mango and coconut, the fruit is known as drupe. So remember this. This can be directly asked. Example of drupe, mango and coconut. They develop from monocarpillary superior ovaries and are one-seeded. So all of us know that mango and coconut have only single seed. What extra information is given is they are also monocarpillary. So there is only one carpel. And the ovary is superior, meaning if I was to tell it in other terms, I will call it as the hypogynous ovary. So everything is below the gynoecium. Ovary is in the top position, highest position. So this is mango and coconut. Fruit is called as drupe. Very important. This can be directly asked as a question. Mango, the pericarp is well differentiated into an outer thin epicarp, middle fleshy mesocarp, and the inner stony hard endocarp. This I already explained. Coconut is also a drupe. The mesocarp is fibrous. So whatever the coconut we eat, this part, this is the mesocarp, which is very fiber rich. So this was very easy for the fruits. Then coming to the seeds, so ovule after fertilization. So the ovary becomes the ripened ovary becomes the fruit, but the fertilized ovule becomes this seed, develops into seeds. A seed is made up of seed coat, embryo, and an embryo. The embryo is made up of radicle, which gives rise to the root. Remember, embryonal axis and one or two cotyledons, as in gram and pea. Two cotyledons in gram and pea and one cotyledon in wheat and maize. So here they are also given the example of monocots and dicots, which I think most of you would be remembering. These are like the key examples of monocots and dicots. Let's also study the structure of these seeds, monocots and dicots. First, for the dicot seed, the outermost covering is the seed coat. Very easy to understand. Seed coat has two layers. This is important. Outer is the testa, inner is the tegmen. So if you speak it loud 3 or 4 times, you will easily remember testa, tegmen, outer testa, inner tegmen, outer testa, inner tegmen, outer testa, inner tegmen. Like that, you can remember the terms. The hilum is a scar on the seed coat through which the developing seeds were attached to the fruit. So the fruit had a connection with the seed, which was able to provide the nourishment to the seed, through which it was able to provide the nourishment to the seed. And after it is detached from there, that region is called as hilum. This was the point where it was connected to the fruit. Above the hilum is a small pore called as the micropyle. So this is the micropyle opening, you can see. And within the seed coat is the embryo consisting of an embryonal axis and two cotyledons. So the embryonal axis will have the upper part or the shoot and the lower part, which is the root, or plumule or radicle, which will later on become the shoot and the root. Cotyledons are often fleshy and full of reserve food material to support the seed growth. At the two ends of the embryonal axis present the radicle and plumule. In some seeds, such as the castor, the endosperm formed as a result of double fertilization is a food storing tissue and called endospermic seeds. So in castor, the endosperm is still intact, and that is why it is called as the endospermic seed. In plants such as bean, gram, pea, the endosperm is not present in mature seeds. Such seeds are called as non-endospermous. Here again, you have to remember the example. If endosperm is present, endospermic seed. Example is castor. So that is how people extract oil from castor. Then in bean, gram, and pea, it is not present. So that is non-endospermous. Very easy term. Coming to the monocot seeds. So monocot seeds are endospermic in nature. This you should remember. You are asked to do a match the following between endospermic and some species of different, uh, you can say, families, then you should be able to understand which of them will be belonging to the monocot families and the dicot families, and based on that, you should be able to understand whether they are endospermic or non-endospermic. Imagine orchids are non-endospermic, so this is kind of exception, and this you should also remember. Orchids are non-endospermic. Mostly they are endospermic, the monocots. In the seeds of cereals such as maize, the seed coat is membranous. So the seed coat is membranous, generally fused with the fruit wall. Endosperm is bulky and stores food because most of the monocots have endosperm. Outer covering of endosperm separates the embryo by proteinaceous layer called as aileron layer. So remember the proteinaceous layer is called aileron layer. Embryo is small and situated in a groove at one end of the endosperm. It consists of one large and shield-shaped cotyledon called as scutellum. So there is only one cotyledon. That is why it is called as monocot. Very easy to understand. And that cotyledon is called scutellum. Short axis with a plumule and radicle. Plumule and radicle are enclosed in a sheath called as coleoptile and coleorhiza. So coleorhiza is covering the radicle and coleoptile is covering the plumule or the stem precursor. Let's look at the diagram. This is the embryo. Lot of endosperm stored in the maize or monocot seed. This is the proteinaceous layer called as the aileron layer. Fruit wall and seed coat are fused. Endosperm, lot of endosperm is stored here, as you can see, roughly 50%. Scutellum is the only scutellum is the only cotyledon present in monocots. Coleoptile is covering the plumule, and coleorhiza is covering the radicle. So it's very easy to understand this diagram once you have understood the concept of different monocot and dicot features. Now coming to some last parts. So semi-technical description of a typical flowering plant. Various morphological features are used to describe flowering plant. Description has to be brief, simple, scientific, present in proper sequence. Plant is described in with its habit, vegetative characters, and then floral character, inflorescence, and flower parts. After describing various parts of the plant, a floral diagram and a floral formula are presented. So remember this when you're describing a plant, although this might not be asked directly, but just for information, remember that first its habit, where it is present, whether it is present in water, on land, in the other desert area, all these things should be described. Then the vegetative characteristics, because these are important for its survival, root, stem, and leaf. These are explained. Then the floral characters, which are important for its sexual reproduction, and the flower parts are explained. So floral diagram can be represented by symbol. BR is for bracteate. So I told you the leaf-like structure uh, coming from the floral node is called as the floral bracts, and K is for calyx, C is for corolla. So remember, don't get confused with K is for calyx or corolla. Just try to say calyx and try to write it with K, so you will remember it for a long time. So K is for calyx. Although you can say I can write corolla also starting with K, but for you to remember, try to write calyx with K-A-L-Y-X, so that you remember that if there is a symbol K, then it is for calyx. P is for corolla, P is for perianth, A is for androecium, G for gynoecium. G underscore is for superior ovary because ovary is above, meaning hypogynous. If G above bar is there, then it is inferior ovary, meaning epigynous. Everything is above the ovary. This is for male, this is female, this is bisexual, both the symbols are there. If there is a circle with a plus sign, then it is actinomorphic. If there is a percentage symbol, then it is zygomorphic. Fusion is indicated by inclusion figure within the bracket. So if it is written in a bracket, then it is to indicate a fusion of the two floral whorls or within the same floral whorl. Addition by a line drawn above the symbol of the. So I will explain it by giving you an example. Floral diagram provides information about the number and the number of parts of the plant, about the number of parts of a flower, arrangement, relation with each other, position of the mother axis with respect to the flower is indicated with a dot at the top of floral diagram. The mother axis where the flower will be attached is shown using a dot. So we'll see this in a diagram. Calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium drawn in successive floral whorl. Calyx being the outermost. Calyx, corolla, androecium, gynoecium. This is the arrangement that we follow. Floral formula also shows cohesion addition within the parts of flower or within the parts of whorls and between the whorls. The floral diagram and floral formula represents the mustard family Brassicaceae. So Brassicaceae is here. You can see first it is actinomorphic. I'll just write it for you. This is actinomorphic, meaning it is radially symmetrical. As you can see, you can draw any line and then this can be divided into equal halves. So this is actinomorphic. Then it is bisexual. So male and female both whorls are present because it has androecium and gynoecium both. Then it has calyx 2 plus 2. So you can see this is the calyx 2 here and 2 here. You can also see this is covered on the top and bottom. There are 4 corolla. This is what kind of aestivation? If you remember different kinds of aestivations that I talked about, this is one of the first ones that I talk about without touching the other members of the same whorl. Yeah, so here it is. This is the valvate kind of estivation that you can see in the uh, Brassicaceae family Corolla. Then androecium is 2 plus 4. So you have these 2 and there are these 4. And then gynoecium, so underscore meaning superior ovary. And there are 2 which are fused. So in bracket because it is to indicate fused. This is how it is indicated. Now let's look at some of the important families and their characteristics. So it is a large family commonly called as potato family. Solanaceae, always remember Solanaceae is for potato, widely distributed tropic, subtropic, temperate zones. So they are describing the habitat. Then the vegetative characters. Vegetative character mostly herb, shrub, small trees. Stem is herbaceous, rarely wood, aerial, erect, blah blah blah. All these things you can remember that it is glabrous. Underground stem example is potato, Solanum tuberosum. So if you remember the name of potato, you'll be easily able to recall that it is Solanaceae family, which is called as the potato family. Solanum tuberosum. Remember this. Leaves, you should remember, leaves are alternate. So one on each side on each internode. Simple can be also pinnately compound. So simple meaning they have only one single midrib and the leaves are coming in different regions of that. So on one midrib there is only one leaf, but it can be also pinnately compound. Exstipulate, so it does not have stipules, and venation is reticulate because it is dicot. So Solanum nigrum, here it is given makoi, the flowering twig of that plant, flower, longitudinal section, stamen, carpel, floral diagram. All the different things are given here for that, and this is the floral diagram of the Solanaceae family. So you can see there are 5 different androecium. Then all these corollas are fused. The calyxes are also fused, and the floral formula is given here. So the inflorescence can be solitary, axillary, cymose, solanum. Not very important. Flowers are bisexual, actinomorphic. So this you can see because there is androecium, gynoecium both. So it is supposed to be bisexual, as you can see here also. Actinomorphic because circle with a plus sign. 5 sepals which are united. So 5 sepals and they are in a bracket meaning united. Valvate aestivation. 5 petals they are also united. Valvate aestivation. See 5 united in a bracket. 5 stamens but they are epipetalous. So they are fused with the uh, petals. So that is why it is epipetalous. Then carpel. Carpels are obligately placed syncarpus meaning fused ovary. So again you will see G2 in brackets. Ovary superior, so G underscore is down. Bilocular placenta are swollen with many ovules. Axial presentation. Fruits are called as berry or capsule. So this can be asked. Important. And seeds are many and endospermous seeds. So this is the floral formula for that. Economic importance, source of food, tomato, brinjal, potato, all the things that we commonly eat belong to the Solanaceae family. Chili, belladonna, ashwagandha. So these all examples you must remember, they can be asked directly. Tobacco, petunia. So there is only one family. I thought there would be more. I think earlier there were Fabaceae, Liliaceae, all these families also. But now they have given only one family, so it's much easier for you to remember this thing. So let me check if there are any questions. Otherwise, I will just summarize the contents and we'll stop this class after that. Okay, so let's summarize this quickly. So this was a quite comprehensive chapter, and I hope I covered it nicely for all of you so that you can understand it well for your exams. And now let's summarize it briefly. Flowering plants exhibit enormous variation in shape, size, structure, mode of nutrition. They have well-developed root and shoot system. Root system can be either tap root in dicots, fibrous root in monocots, and also we saw the example of adventitious roots. Generally, dicots have taproot, monocots have fibrous root. We'll also see the adaptation of different root systems and shoot systems later on. Roots in some plants get modified for storage of food, mechanical support, respiration. Shoot system is differentiated in stem, leaf, flower, and fruits. Morphological features stem like the presence of nodes and internodes. Multicellular hair and positively phototropic nature helps to differentiate the stem from root. This is important. This can be asked: what are the characteristics of stem that differentiate it from the roots? So it has multicellular hairs, unlike the unicellular hairs in the roots usually. Then it is positively phototropic, so it moves towards light. And leaf is a lateral outgrowth of the stem developed exogenously at the node, so it is developing towards the outer side. These are green in color to perform their function of photosynthesis, exhibit variation in their shape, size, margin, so everything will show variation. Extent of incision of the leaf blade lamina. Based on that, you can call it simple leaf or a compound leaf. Then flower is a modified shoot. So I told you the shoot apical meristem gets converted to floral meristem, and that gives rise to different floral whorls. Meant for sexual reproduction, flowers are arranged in different type of inflorescence. Racemose, cymose. Racemose is racing, so it has indeterminate growth, so it is continuously growing. And the flowers at the bottom are the older ones, and the one at the top are the younger ones. That is called acropetal succession. Similarly, cymose is opposite of that. Enormous variation in symmetry, ovary, blah blah blah. After fertilization, ovary is modified into fruits. Ovary is modified into fruits. Ovules are modified into seeds. Maybe monocot or dicot. Shape, size, everything is varying in the nature. The floral characteristic form the basis of classification and identification of flowering plants. Semi-technical distribution of family. Flowering plant described in definite sequence by using scientific terms. Floral features are represented in summarized form as floral diagram and floral formula. This you should remember. Now they have only one floral formula, so it is important that you remember this properly. Actinomorphic, bisexual, calyx 5 fused, corolla 5 fused, androecium 5, calyx fused with androecium meaning epipetalous condition, gynoecium 2 fused, and superior ovary. This you should remember. So that was it from this chapter. I hope it was useful for some of you. And it was quite a long chapter, but I tried to cover it as comprehensively as possible so that it benefits you and helps you prepare well for these exams like NEET and IAT. So I would like to end this session here. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section, and I will try to answer them as soon as possible. I hope this was useful for all of you. Okay, I'll see you in the next class. Till then, keep studying and keep doing hard work. Bye bye.